If love has to come with bruises to your spirit, it is not love. It is a lesson wearing a lie. There is a quiet violence that hides behind the word tradition. It does not scream or strike. It whispers, it lingers, it wears a smile and speaks in generations. It tells you to sit down when your spirit wants to rise. It teaches you to bite your tongue even when your soul is choking. It asks you to honor something just because it is old, not because it is just. So many of us were raised to believe that tradition is sacred, and some of it is. There are customs that hold memory and meaning, values that keep us grounded and grateful, but not everything we inherit deserves a seat at our future. Some traditions are just habits dressed in holy clothes, rituals built to protect power, not people. Disrespect often wears the mask of ritual. It is the uncle who tells you to be quiet because women shouldn't talk back. It's the aunt who scoffs at your independence saying, "That's not how we were raised." It is the father who believes his word is final, not because it is right, but because it is male. It is the mother who tells you to endure, not to heal. They say, "It's just how things are," but just is not the same as justice. You're told to forgive without an apology, to serve without question, to visit without being welcome, to celebrate when your heart is breaking because it's tradition. You're told to stay silent at family gatherings while people mock your life choices, insult your partner, question your faith, and shame your body because this is how we do things here. But let us speak plainly. Any tradition that demands your silence is not culture. It's control. Any custom that crushes your identity is not heritage, it is hierarchy. And any practice that protects abuse under the banner of family is not legacy, it is a lie. We must be brave enough to separate the sacred from the harmful. Just because our ancestors survived it doesn't mean we must repeat it. Just because it is familiar doesn't mean it is safe. And just because they mean well doesn't mean they aren't wrong. To challenge a tradition is not to disrespect your elders. It is to respect yourself enough to say, "I will not carry pain forward just because someone before me did." That is not rebellion, that is healing. You were not born to be polite in the presence of disrespect. You were not born to bow to a custom that breaks you. And you were not born to keep quiet simply because it's always been done that way. Because freedom does not whisper, it declares. And love, true love, never demands your submission in the name of tradition. It only asks for your wholeness. It begins softly, a sigh on the phone, a pause that feels heavier than words. Then comes the sentence, dressed in sweetness but dipped in sorrow, "We just don't see you anymore." And with that, a familiar tug in your chest. That ache, that pull, that pressure, not from hate. No, never hate. From love, they say, from care, from concern. But concern, real concern, uplifts. This, what you're feeling, this is not concern. This is guilt, emotional guilt, wrapped in affection, shaped to look like love. They don't yell, they don't curse. They simply make you question your choices. If you really cared, you'd be here. If I meant something to you, you would have answered sooner. I guess you're too busy for family now. These words are not always loud. They are subtle, seasoned with years of shared stories and bloodlines. They are gentle weapons crafted by people who say they only want what's best for you, yet somehow you're the one always bending, breaking, burning yourself up to keep them warm. There's a particular kind of grief that comes when the people who say they love you try to mold you into someone smaller, someone more compliant, someone easier to manage. They miss the version of you that needed them, the one who didn't question, the one who would drop everything to prove loyalty. But when you begin to evolve, when you start creating boundaries, prioritizing peace, building a life on your own terms, they get uneasy. Not because you're doing wrong, but because your growth challenges their comfort. Not because they truly fear for you, but because they fear losing the control they once had. So they don't attack you. No, they shift the blame onto your heart. "We're just worried about you. You've changed. This isn't who you used to be. They disguise manipulation as love and disguise love as obligation. And in the end, it's your spirit that pays the price. You rearrange your days to call more, to visit more, to explain yourself again and again. You sacrifice your own rest, your own energy, because you don't want to seem ungrateful, because they remind you of all they've done, all they've given, every ride, every meal, every moment they stood by you when no one else would. And that gratitude, that sacred, beautiful thing, is twisted into a shackle. They don't ask you to remember. They expect repayment, not in words, but in obedience. You try to make them happy. You try to explain your dreams, your goals, your truth. But no matter how gently you speak, they hear defiance. No matter how kindly you pull away, they feel abandonment. And so you become two versions of yourself. The one who shows up smiling, suppressing your voice, pretending everything is fine, and the one you are when you're alone, exhausted, confused, carrying the weight of a love that always demands more than it gives. But let this be known, love does not manipulate. Love does not punish with silence. Love does not offer itself with one hand and guilt you with the other. True concern is curious. It asks, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why haven't you been here?" It listens, not with conditions, but with compassion. It doesn't shrink you to preserve a dynamic that benefits only them. It evolves as you do. It's okay to walk away from conversations that leave you drained. It's okay to protect your mental space, even from voices that once nurtured you. It's okay to want love without the price tag of emotional debt. You owe your family your honesty, your kindness, your respect, but you do not owe anyone your peace. They may say, "We're just looking out for you," but looking out should never feel like being watched. Looking out should never feel like being cornered. What they call concern might simply be discomfort. Discomfort that you are no longer the version of you that tolerated their unspoken rules. Discomfort that you are learning to live without their approval. Discomfort that you are finally recognizing the difference between love that frees and love that forces. Let them feel what they feel, but do not let guilt be the bridge you keep crossing just to be understood. You are not selfish for not explaining yourself again. You are not heartless for choosing silence over self-sacrifice. You are not wrong for needing space from those who never learned the language of respect. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is love yourself enough not to answer guilt with obedience, not to meet manipulation with compromise, not to trade your well-being for their comfort. Let them call it distance. Let them call it change. Let them call it anything they want. But you call it freedom, and that's a name worth answering to. There's a strange silence that follows your evolution, a hush that falls between the ones who used to cheer for you when you were small, when you were struggling, when you were easy to understand. And now they don't quite know what to do with you. They were comfortable when you needed their guidance, their approval, their help, when your voice trembled before you spoke, when your dreams were still in pencil, easily erased. But now your sentences end with periods instead of question marks. Now your boundaries are bold, your goals unapologetic. You've stepped into your own, and for some, that is the deepest betrayal. They don't say it outright. No, shame rarely shows up so directly. It sneaks in through laughter, sarcasm, silence. You think you're better than us now? Don't forget where you came from. Oh, look at you. Too good for this now? They speak it with their eyes when you walk into the room. They lace it into family dinners and group chats, into traditions you no longer feel comfortable following. And when you try to explain your growth, your healing, your desire to live on your own terms, they call it rebellion, they call it distance, they call it ungrateful. But growth, real growth, is not a betrayal. It is a homecoming to yourself, to the truth of who you were before the world told you who to be. You see, they clapped when you crawled. They smiled when you stumbled. But now that you're walking in purpose, standing in your own light, they shade it, they shrink it, because it threatens the version of you they were most comfortable with. They don't want to lose you, but they don't want to meet the new you either, the healed you, the aware you, the one who no longer tolerates the unspoken rules that kept generations stuck in cycles of silence and self-betrayal. So instead of reaching toward you, they reach back, pulling you down with guilt, with mockery, with reminders of who you used to be. And make no mistake, people will often prefer your past because your past needed them. Your present doesn't. And your future terrifies them. It's not that they don't love you, it's that they don't know how to love a version of you they can't control. So when you start setting boundaries, they say you're cold. When you speak with clarity, they say you've become arrogant. When you rest, they say you're lazy. When you choose your peace, they say you're selfish. But what they're really saying is, we don't recognize you now that you've stopped sacrificing yourself for our comfort. Let that truth settle. Let it sit in your bones. Because it is not your job to be digestible. It is not your responsibility to shrink for anyone's approval. You don't owe them the version of you that was quiet, compliant, apologetic. You don't owe them an explanation for your healing, your joy, your evolution. You are allowed to grow without guilt. You are allowed to protect your light from people who mistake your shine for rebellion. You are allowed to walk away from rooms that only loved you when you were dim. And yes, it will hurt. It will hurt to outgrow the hands that once held you. It will ache to be misunderstood by the very people who watched you rise from nothing. But growth isn't cruel, it's necessary. There will always be those who preferred you broken, not because they are evil, but because they don't know how to meet you whole. And sometimes love can only reach as far as someone's wounds will allow. They can't celebrate what they've never dared to become. But you have dared. You've dared to speak when silence was safer. You've dared to dream when fear whispered you weren't worthy. You've dared to become someone new, someone rooted, someone rising. So no, you are not the same. And that is not something to feel shame about. That is something to honor. That is something to carry like a crown. If they shame your growth, let that reveal their own stagnancy. If they mock your change, let it be the mirror they refuse to look into. If they leave you, let it be a clearing for those who will love you fully, not just conveniently. You did not come this far to turn back. You did not heal just to be guilted into being small again. You did not rise only to fold under the weight of their discomforts. You grew, and that is a sacred thing, not something to apologize for, but something to protect with everything in you. They don't need chains to bind you. They use roles. They use words like daughter, son, brother, wife, provider, caretaker, eldest, only one we've got left. They use titles not to lift you, but to hold you in place. And then they call that love. It doesn't come as a scream. It comes as a story, a narrative passed down, one generation at a time, until you inherit not just a name, but a script. You are told who to be, how to move, what to feel, and who to serve, not out of truth, not out of calling, but out of duty. They say, family first. And you believed it, until you noticed that family first really meant everyone else first, except you, until you realized that loyalty was expected, not returned, until you saw that your worth was measured by how much you gave, not how deeply you felt. They'll say you're selfish when you're tired, ungrateful when you say no, cold when you set boundaries. They'll remind you of all they did when you were small, not as love, but as leverage. You are told, this is your role, this is your place. But that place is a box, that role is a leash. And the moment you try to breathe outside of it, they say you've changed. They call it responsibility, but it feels like guilt. They call it tradition, but it feels like a trap. They call it family, but it feels like you're being slowly erased, because when love is real, it doesn't need to threaten. When love is honest, it doesn't have to hold your history over your head. They say, after all we've done for you, but if what they gave was truly love, why must you pay it back in pieces of yourself? You are not a bank of emotional debt. You are not a role to be filled like a job description. You are not here to be endlessly responsible for someone else's comfort at the cost of your own peace. You are not unloving for wanting to be seen as more than a function. You are not a failure for refusing to carry everyone's burdens silently. You are not cruel for needing space to breathe. There is a manipulation that masquerades as love, where care is conditional and support comes with strings, where your worth is tied not to who you are, but to how well you perform the role they've given you. You might hear, "You're the strong one, we count on you." But who do you count on? "You're the responsible one, we need you." But what do you need? They'll say, "You're our rock." But even rocks crack under constant weight. Even the strongest hands grow weary when they're always holding everyone else together. Sometimes the expectations don't come from cruelty, but from fear. They fear losing the version of you that always said yes. They fear what happens when you no longer dance to the rhythm of obligation. They fear that if you stop giving, the house of cards might fall. But you are not their foundation. You are not their rescue. You are not their savior. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to say, "I am more than this role." You are allowed to choose yourself, even when it disappoints someone else. And yes, it will be hard, because roles come with comfort. Even when they hurt, they're familiar. But comfort is not the same as connection, and guilt is not the same as grace. You have the right to rewrite the story, to be a daughter who speaks up, to be a son who chooses peace, to be a partner who sets boundaries, to be a person, not a role, not a label, but a full and breathing human being. You don't need to earn your place in someone's life through sacrifice. You don't need to destroy yourself to be good. You don't need to say yes just because they expect you to. What you owe yourself is honesty. What you owe them is clarity. And what you owe no one is your soul. When someone manipulates you through obligation, they are not loving you. They are using you. When someone defines you by your role, they are not seeing you. They are managing you. And when someone demands that you stay the same for their comfort, they are not protecting you. They are preserving control. But you were not born to be an actor in someone else's play. You were born to write your own script, to choose your truth, to rise not just because they need you, but because you've finally chosen you. It doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with a smile. Sometimes it walks in wearing the face of someone you love. But it always feels the same, like being pushed when you've already said no, like being unseen even when you're standing right there. You said it clearly. You asked gently. You explained yourself more than once. You whispered your discomfort, and when that didn't work, you tried saying it louder, and still they laughed. Still they brushed it off. Still they acted like your boundaries were suggestions, not truth. They call it just joking. They call it tradition. They call it how we've always been. But what it really is disrespect, disguised in familiarity, because when someone truly honors you, they don't need to agree with your boundary to respect it. A boundary is not a wall. It is a bridge between two people built with mutual respect. But if only one of you is willing to stand on it, it's not a bridge. It's a warning sign. And some people keep walking right past it, right over it, like your needs are nothing more than a puddle in the road. You may hear, "You're being sensitive. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You used to be more fun." But what they really mean is, you used to be easier to control. You used to tolerate things that made you uncomfortable. You used to bend more. And when you stop bending, when you start standing tall in your own truth, they grow unsettled. because now they have to look at you differently. Not as someone they can lean on without permission, but as someone they must now respect. And that's a harder love for some to offer. They may pretend they don't understand, but they do. People understand boundaries just fine when they have their own. What they don't like is having to honor yours. They remember what you once allowed. They bank on the version of you that stayed quiet, that avoided conflict, that smiled through the discomfort just to keep the peace. But that version of you was surviving, not thriving. That version of you was shrinking, not shining. And now you've drawn a line, not out of cruelty, but out of care, for yourself, for your peace, for the dignity they kept stepping over. They may say, you've changed, and you have. You've grown tired of explaining why your no is valid. You've grown weary of having to defend your boundaries like they're courtroom cases. You've grown strong enough to realize that people who love you will not ask you to prove your pain to be worthy of their respect. You've learned that a boundary isn't a threat. It's an invitation to love you better. And if someone sees that as a challenge, they are not listening. They are controlling. There are people who will act as if your boundaries are an attack, as if you setting limits is somehow a betrayal. But let that be their mirror, not your burden. You are not here to be liked at the cost of being respected. You are not here to make others comfortable while you suffer silently. You are not here to teach grown people how to honor what you've already told them more than once. If someone consistently dismisses your boundaries, believe this: it is not forgetfulness. It is a choice to ignore what matters to you, a choice to continue doing what benefits them, even if it hurts you, a choice to make your discomfort your responsibility, not theirs. And you get to make a choice too. You get to decide that being kind does not mean being silent, that being loving does not mean being a doormat, that being family or friend or partner does not grant anyone access to parts of you they refuse to honor. You are allowed to draw new lines. You are allowed to reinforce old ones. You are allowed to walk away from anyone who makes respecting you feel like a chore. The more you grow, the more sacred your peace becomes. And sacred things must be protected, not begged for, not defended, just known. You don't need to explain over and over again. You don't need to justify your no. You don't need to be patient with people who are only patient with you when you're convenient. Some will say you're too guarded, too cold, too rigid. But here is the truth: you are not too much. You've simply had enough. Enough of bending, enough of explaining, enough of being available to people who never learned to listen. You are worthy of spaces where you don't have to fight to be heard. You are worthy of love that pauses when you say stop. You are worthy of relationships where your boundaries are not just respected, but cherished. Let that be your standard. Let that be your protection. Let that be your peace. They say loyalty like it's a prayer, like it's the holiest word in the family gospel. Be loyal. Stand by blood. Don't air dirty laundry. We don't talk about that outside this house. And so you learned, didn't you, to bite your tongue when it burned with truth, to swallow pain like medicine, bitter but expected, to call wounds just part of love and silence strength. But there's nothing strong about pretending. Toxic loyalty doesn't scream in your face. It whispers in corners behind closed doors where no one else can hear the ache. It looks like keeping secrets that rot your spirit. It looks like defending people who never defended you. It looks like being told that love means silence, that standing up for yourself is betrayal. They made you believe that survival depended on your silence, that the family bond was more sacred than your self-worth, that if you dared speak up, you'd be shamed, not just by one, but by all, because when silence becomes tradition, truth becomes rebellion. So you sat at tables with people who hurt you and called it maturity. You hugged those who never apologized and called it healing. You stayed in rooms where your soul shriveled and called it loyalty. But let's speak it clearly now. Loyalty is not love when it asks you to abandon yourself. Loyalty is not noble when it costs you your peace. Loyalty is not holy when it protects the one who did the harm, but punishes the one who was hurt. Some people want your silence because your voice reminds them of what they buried. Some families call your truth betrayal because they've built their unity on pretending. And some cultures praise endurance, even when what you're enduring is emotional violence. But what if loyalty means something deeper? What if it's not about staying no matter what, but about staying true to yourself, to your healing, to your dignity? They will tell you, you don't walk away from family. But what they really mean is don't disturb the system. They mean don't name the pain. They mean don't embarrass us with your honesty. But your pain is not a performance, and your story is not shameful. What is shameful is the way you were taught to carry their sins in your silence. You are not disloyal for refusing to pretend. You are not a traitor for choosing truth over tradition. You are not cold for choosing peace over performance. And yes, it will feel like betrayal to them because they mistook your silence for agreement. They mistook your forgiveness for permission. They mistook your endurance for eternal access to your soul. But you've grown now, and growing means outgrowing the roles that kept you small. It means recognizing that keeping the peace at the cost of your voice is not love. It's emotional exile. They'll say, why bring it up now? Because now you have the words. Now you have the strength. Now you understand that speaking is not just for them, it's for you, for the child in you who was taught to keep secrets, for the adult in you who now carries that silence like a chain. There are some rooms you leave not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to go. Some cycles you break, not to shame them, but to heal you. Some truths you speak, not to hurt, but to breathe again. And if they call that betrayal, so be it. Let them call your voice a storm. Let them call your honesty a fracture. Let them call your distance a wound. But let them never again call your silence loyalty. True loyalty uplifts. It listens. It grows when truth is spoken, not when pain is hidden. And if the only version of love they know requires you to disappear inside yourself, then that is not your home. That is not your legacy. You are not here to be the keeper of secrets that destroy you. You are not here to trade your mental health for tradition. You are not here to protect those who never once protected your heart. You are here to rise, to speak, to take up space, to be loyal first and always to your own soul. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for choosing healing. And you are not disloyal for choosing yourself. The love you deserve will not break you down to build someone else up. The respect you need will not ask you to bleed quietly in the name of family. And the life you're called to live will only begin, truly begin, when you stop tolerating what was never love to begin with. Because your soul is not a landfill, it is a temple. And not everyone, no matter their title, gets to walk in.